Okay, Erev Tov. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is awesome already. My name is Marc Baker. I'm the president and CEO of Combined Jewish Philanthropies. And while I wish we could be together in person, this is just another example of the new ways that we are creating community and connection during this strange and challenging time. For so many of us, the high holidays are one of the most meaningful times of the year. To come together in person with our whole community, with our families. For many of us, these are the days of the year when we attend synagogue, sometimes the only days of the year, kind of like a pilgrimage. And for many of us, these are the days when we look forward to meals and time with family and friends. And this year, for most of us, things are going to be different. How we celebrate the high holidays will be yet another disruption to our personal lives, our ritual lives, our communities, to the rhythm of the Jewish year that forms our Jewish memory and shapes our identities. At the same time, there's unprecedented opportunities to access Jewish content, learning and prayer, to connect with community and to one another in new ways. And tonight is just one of those examples. I'm not sure we could have pulled this off in person, actually, especially during the days leading up to Rosh Hashanah. So first I want to thank my colleagues, especially Ariel Williams, Carissa Wolf, and Rabbi Elise Winnick, who've made this happen on the CJP end. And thank you to the amazing and diverse group of rabbis, leaders, and teachers who are with us tonight in one of the busiest and most intense weeks of their year. They've come into our homes to share their Torah and words of inspiration with us. These teachers reflect the diversity of our Jewish community and the breadth of ways that anyone who wants to find meaning and connection in Judaism and Jewish life can do it here in Greater Boston. And the fact that we're all together tonight reflects the power of a welcoming, inclusive, caring, and creative Greater Boston Jewish community that is stronger because of its diversity and not in spite of it. Thank you, all of you, for holding our community of communities on your shoulders over these past 6 months, and for your vision, passion, and leadership as we celebrate this new year and look toward the future. And thanks to all of you for showing up and choosing to be part of this. And by this, I mean tonight's Rosh Hashanah Seder, but I also mean our community, the Jewish people, the thousands-year-old Jewish conversation that is still unfolding today. When you choose to participate, when you choose to show up, step up, to give in all of the incredible ways that each of you does, you are contributing your unique voice to this. You're helping to build a Jewish community in which every neshama, every soul, every voice, every human being matters. A community in which the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. You're helping to create a Judaism that is dynamic, creative, and inclusive, that honors thousands of years of wisdom, practice, and tradition, while living out the innovative spirit that has not only kept us alive, but kept us thriving, adapting, and relevant to our changing lives and our changing world. Together, we are ensuring that our Torah is timeless, and that we contribute our unique voices, our Jewish voices, to a human conversation and to the most pressing issues facing our 21st century world. That's what you do every time you choose to be part of Jewish community and Jewish life. Thank you. Which brings me to tonight. So while my family does have the tradition of blessing new fruits as simanim, signs of symbols on Rosh Hashanah, I confess that I hadn't heard of the concept of a Rosh Hashanah Seder, which it seems comes to us through the Sephardi and Mizrahi traditions. That tells you something about Ashkenazi American Judaism. What I love about the formalization of these blessings into a Seder, though, is that just like with the Passover Seder, we're reminded of one of the greatest aspects of rabbinic Judaism, the shift from a priest-centered and temple-centered Jewish life to a family-centered and home-centered Jewish life. When we celebrate Rosh Hashanah in our own homes, just like when we light Shabbat candles, study Torah, even read Jewish books with our kids. We are living the Torah's vision of Mamlechet Kohanim, of a nation of priests. Each of us are the spiritual leaders and the transmitters of meaning and connection to one another and to our next generation. Of course, we acknowledge and mourn the loss of the temple in Jerusalem. And this year, many of us are mourning the loss of being able to get together in our local synagogues and temples the way we are used to. Yet, as it said in last week's Torah portion, we don't need to go anywhere to find our connection to God or to Torah or even to one another. Not to the heavens and not across the sea and not even down the street. Ki karov elecha hadavar b'ficha ubilvavcha la'asoto, because the word, the practice, the teaching, the meaning, and the connection are close to you. They're in your mouths and they're in your hearts to do them, to observe them, and to live them out. Tonight, we prepare for the high holiday season in which we're going to need to bring a little extra intention, a little extra sanctity to the mikdashim, the sanctuaries that are our homes, our families, our tables, and yes, our food. The ritualizing of food is a way to turn even a date, an apple, a fish into a means of connection, a powerful symbol of our past and our future, our hopes and our intentions for ourselves, our families, and for the world that we aspire and commit to co-creating together. So I'd like to bless us as we start this Seder, Yehi Ratzon. May we be together, learn together, and celebrate together with gratitude and appreciation for our Creator and for the world that renews itself every year and every day. And may we affirm our shared ethical and spiritual responsibility to keep playing our parts as creators and repairers. Our community and our world need us right now. I'm looking forward to a meaningful Seder tonight and wishing all of you a Shana Tova U'Mituka, a sweet, happy, and healthy New Year.
Hello, everybody. I am Cantor Hollis Schachner from Temple Shir Tikva in Wayland. It is such an honor to be with everyone this evening. Apples and honey for Rosh Hashanah, a good year, a sweet year. Tapuchim hu dvash le Rosh Hashanah. Tapuchim hu dvash le Rosh Hashanah. Perhaps there is no taste more closely bound to Rosh Hashanah than apples dipped in honey. And if your family is anything like mine, it's a very highly anticipated ritual right around now to head to an apple orchard, preferably one where you're allowed to climb the ladders. And having grown up in Miami with a yard full of mangoes and coconuts and avocados, I have to say there's something so enchanting and magical about picking my own apple for Rosh Hashanah right from a tree. And apple trees also involve the enchantment. They invoke the enchantment of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, especially up in the north where apples grow in the Golan Heights, near miles from the orange and mango groves down in the valley below. It's so magical to me the way the land of Israel provides for these fruits to grow so closely to each other when my sense of climate scale carries me from Florida to New England. And if Israel is a land of apples, it's also most certainly a land of honey, as the Torah teaches, milk and honey, Eretz Zavat Chalav. While today we tend to dip our apples in honey made by bees, the dvash in ancient days was likely honey made from tamarim, which I know you'll hear more about soon, from dates, a syrup that's known as silan, which is ubiquitous in Israel, kind of like maple syrup here in New England. So for this Rosh Hashanah, I have before me some early apples and some bee honey, and also a little bit of silan from the land of Israel to feed that part of my soul which is always facing east. But why apples and honey specifically for Rosh Hashanah? Apples have always been highly symbolic in Jewish tradition. Some, but not all of the sources say it was an apple that Eve gave to Adam. But according to the Mishnah, apples symbolize Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. And also our ancestor Isaac said of his son Jacob, "Behold, the fragrance of my son is like the fragrance of a field which the Lord has blessed." And the great sage Rashi taught that this was the scent of an apple orchard, the very fragrance of Gan Eden. And Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, we read gorgeous, sensory, apple-infused love poetry, like Tachat hatapuach oraticha, beneath the apple tree I aroused you, and Vereach hapech katapuchim, your breath is like the scent of apples, all long considered a poetic metaphor for the love between God and the people of Israel. It's also worth reflecting that the first letters of these most famous words from the Song of Song, Ani lidodi vidodi li, I am my beloved's and my beloved is for me, also spell out the Hebrew word for Elul, the month in which we find ourselves right now, preparing our hearts for the new year. So in this way, that taste of apples on Rosh Hashanah is like a renewal of vows between the Jewish people and God, a promise of loving commitment for the year to come. And in Gematria, the mystical numerical tradition, the word for honey, dvash, corresponds to Av Harachamim, a name of God meaning Father of Mercy. So dipping our apples in honey is an embodied prayer for God's merciful judgment on Rosh Hashanah. So bearing all of these traditions in mind, we savor our tapuchim udvash with my favorite little children's folk song from Israel for this season, asking God to bless us with a new year as sweet as the taste of apples and honey. Tapuchim udvash le'Rosh Hashanah, Tapuchim udvash le'Rosh Hashanah, Shana tova, Shana metuka, Shana tova, Shana metuka, Tapuchim udvash le'Rosh Hashanah, Tapuchim udvash le'Rosh Hashanah. And so we get to pick up a slice of apple and dip it in honey and even a little silan, just because, and say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri ha'etz. And we go on to say, Yehi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, shetechadesh aleinu shana tova umetuka. We praise you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, creator of the fruit of the tree. May it be your will, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, to bless us all with a sweet, healthy, meaningful new year.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Cantor Schachner. And we move from apples and honey to dates, as Cantor Hollis Schachner spoke about it. I am Rabbi Claudia Kreiman, Senior Rabbi of TBZ, Temple Beth Zion in Brookline, Massachusetts. And it's also an honor to be here with you. In our home, our practice has always to have been to have all many kinds of foods at the table before we start the real meal. And some of those are the traditional foods that we're doing today with all the Yehi Ratzon, the May it be your will blessings that we're going to be learning and saying tonight. And sometimes some surprising foods, it's not mine, my spouse puts them, and we play with words and make up blessings. It can be from jelly beans to some strange veggies that are found at Russo's or Whole Foods, to M&Ms, those are the favorite of the kids, to the traditional ones. And we play with words. We use words in Hebrew, in English, in Spanish too, making up blessings for the year. And this is one of the things I love so much about Rosh Hashanah, and especially about Rosh Hashanah Seder, is the notion of using words to bless. Because we all know about the power of words and the power of language, and how words can bring blessing, but words can also hurt and can bring hatred to the world. So this Seder has in it the meaning that actually words matter and that we can use our words for blessing. Now dates, That's my favorite one always. Those are part of the traditional Rosh Hashanah Seder. One reason is because, as many of you know, dates are one of the 7 species of Israel. And it's known when we say, like Cantor Hollis Schachner said, when we say, Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash, Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash, actually, and this is like a sick or something that might break a lot of your dreams, Dvash, their honey, the land that flows milk and honey, is actually talking about Silan that we saw before, honey dates, date honey, which is actually really, really delicious. So I really recommend. Dates have a traditional blessing on Rosh Hashanah. The traditional blessing that we say works with the word tamar, which is the word for dates, tamar, to the word tamu, tam, which means in Hebrew to end. So the traditional blessing says, Yehi ratzon milfanecha, Adonai Eloheinu v'Eloi avotenu, may it be your will, God and God of our ancestors, that there come an end to our enemies, to our haters, and those who wish evil upon us. שאיתנו אויבינו ושונאינו וכל מבקשי רעתנו. The notion of playing with the word tamar, to itamu, that we can bring an end to hatred, to evil, and to our enemies. Now there is a story I want to share with you, which is one of my favorites from the Talmud, from the Tractate of Brachot, about Bruria, the wife of Rabbi Meir, one of the only women that are named in the Talmud telling and teaching Torah. And it's a story that has inspired me personally for many years. And it works with the word tamu, itamu, from a verse of Psalm. So this is the story. The Talmud tells us that there were thugs in the neighborhood of Rabbi Meir who caused him a great deal of trouble. Rabbi Meir accordingly prayed that they should die. That's why you pray. There are thugs in your neighborhood. You pray that they die. And his wife, Ruria, said to him, how do you make that such a prayer should be permitted? And she came and quoted for him a verse from Psalm, which says, Itamu chataim min haaretz. Let's chataim, let sins, wrongdoings, cease from earth. And she asked him, does it say, Itamu chotim min haaretz? Does it say the verse that the evildoers should end? Now, for the Hebrew speakers, when you write chataim or chotim, chataim, sins, and chotim, sinners, in Hebrew, without nekudot, without the punctuation, they look exactly the same. So you could make that confusion. And she explained to him, no, the verse says that you have to pray that sins end, that wrongdoings end, not the wrongdoers. How does she explain that? She says to him, what you do need to pray is that the people who are doing wrong, the thugs in the neighborhood, should repent. And if you pray for the repentance, then there won't be more sins, there won't be more sinners. Bruria, in this incredible passage, invites us to understand that the wrongdoing of people is a complicated thing to understand. And the prayer that she asked from Rabbi Meir to say is a prayer of possibility of change. Bruria speaks of hope, of the possibility of human beings to change, to grow, to repent. Bruria speaks to the possibility of redemption. So I would like to offer Bruria's teaching as a teaching for us to look at the world. Instead of feeling despair, fear, anger that we all feel at this time as we live in so much darkness, so much suffering, I hear Bruria's voice that says to me, let's pray for the possibility of change. Let's believe that the world can be a different place, that people can be different. Let's not fall into despair. And let's remember that prayer is not enough. So our hope and our prayer brings action to the world that make that change possible. Now, in the spirit of playing with words in Hebrew and in English, I want to quote a friend of my family in Israel, Rabbi Menachem Kalush, who always would say, when I spent some Rosh Hashanah with him in Yerushalayim, he would take a date and he will play, and this with my accent might not come through so well, so you have to try here. Tamar, T-A-M-A-R, is a word for date in Hebrew. He would say, or he says, I believe he says, may it be your will that we have a better tomorrow. Tamar, tomorrow. You get it? So the best thing with Tamar is, may it be your will that we have a better tomorrow. So I invite us to say the traditional blessing that calls for the end of hatred and enemies. And as Bruria teaches us, that change is possible. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri ha'etz. Yehi ratzon milefanecha Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu. Sheitamu oiveinu ve'sonenu ve'chol mebakshei ra'atenu. May it be your will, God and God of our ancestor, that there comes an end to an enemy's hatred and those who wish evil upon us. And may we have a better tomorrow. Amen.
Amen.
Hello there. My name is Molly Kazin Marshall. I am the Outreach and Engagement Manager for 18 Doors in Boston. And I'm going to share my screen with you tonight because I did a whole bunch of research about the Rosh Hashanah Seder. This is my very first Seder. And so I had a great time learning about all of the different parts of the Seder. Hopefully you can hear me a little better now. All right, so let's share my screen. Here we go. All right, so next up we have gezer, carrots. And before this year, I never knew that carrots were a traditional Rosh Hashanah food. I grew up in an Ashkenazi family where Rosh Hashanah Seders were not something that we often did. But in my learning, I learned, Hebrew is all about the root words, which is appropriate considering that carrots are root vegetables. And so the Hebrew word gezer's root means both carrot and a decree. So with this in mind, we request that God withholds any evil decrees and only judges us with positive decrees, positive judgments. And so I did a little bit of thinking about this. A lot of what I do with 18 Doors is thinking, how do we explain Jewish custom and ritual for folks who are unfamiliar, who are in interfaith families and relationships? How do we make sense of this in our own Jewish lives and in the lives of others? And so I actually found that when we turn to Eastern European Jews who spoke Yiddish, the word for carrot is similar to the word for more or increase. So I was on the phone with my 90-year-old grandmother today who grew up speaking Yiddish, and don't blame her for my horrible pronunciation, but we have meren, which is to increase or more, and also carrots. So I'm going to go with the Yiddish meaning here because that's what is meaningful to me and what made sense to me. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about a blessing for increased bounty. We can pray for an increased bounty. We can hope for an increased bounty. But as those before me said, sometimes prayer is not enough. We have to make the change happen. So what are ways that we can work to bring more of that positivity, more of that bounty into our lives and the lives of others? So stick with me with this metaphor right now. We're going to talk about a harvest. It is harvest season. We spoke a little about going to an apple orchard and picking those apples off the tree, and we are harvesting. So with this harvest, we get more of a bounty when we harvest together. When we're in interfaith families, when we're members of a larger community, when we're in our greater Boston community, and when we're in our homes right now, maybe feeling separate from our larger community, we get more done when we harvest together, when we work towards a common goal. Even if we approach things from different sides or different techniques, be it a different faith or a different culture or a different denomination of Judaism, It's better when we work together. So think now, what are the ways that you can work to increase your own bounty? How can you bring more positivity into your life and the lives of others? How can we work together to increase the bounty in our communities? What are the good things we can do to make sure that bounty can nourish all of us and not just a few of us? And how can we share this with all who are around us? If you have any ideas with the people who you're sitting with tonight, or maybe if you're going to go and chat with a friend or family later on, think for a moment, what are ways that you can increase the bounty? What are ways that you can spread positivity? There is so much going on right now that can make us feel bogged down with the negatives. We are getting rid of the hateful words and the negative decrees, as Rabbi Claudia said. And so what can we do to bring more of the positive? So if you have ideas and want to share with the folks next to you, if you're with family or friends tonight, feel free to do that for a moment. If you want to throw an idea in the chat box of ways that you can spread positivity, either within your home, your community, your Jewish community, your greater community, whatever it may be, I love to hear those ideas. And even if spreading that positivity starts small, you can help to increase the bounty to those around you. Now, in my learning tonight, I found that this word for the increased bounty, the plenty for Yiddish, and the words for carrots comes from cutting your carrots in the shape of a gold coin or silver dollar. So when you have your whole bowl of carrot circles, it looks like a whole bowl of plenty. And so think for a moment, how can we spread that with those around us? How can we make sure that everyone has access, everyone understands what's going on, everyone has a way to make meaning out of what you are doing? How do you spread that bounty? So with that, we can go, and you'll have to forgive me again, Hebrew is not my top language, but I'm working on it. So we have Yehi Ratzon Milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu Shetirgoz Aleinu Gezerot Tovot. May it be your will, eternal God and the God of our ancestors, that you decree for us good outcomes.
Shana Tova, everyone, and welcome back. So I am Laura Mandel, Executive Director of the JArts Collaborative, and continuing with this theme of the breakout rooms, I wanted to give us a chance, rather than actually listening to me talk at first, look at a little art. So anticipating that the high holidays would be a little bit challenging this year, we had the good fortune of being able to commission a few artists to create some artwork for the holidays. And so what I want to do is share some work with you. So if you give me one moment, I'm going to do a screen share. Hold on one second. Oh, hold on one second. Sorry. No. Hold on. Elise, it's not seemingly letting me share. Hold on one second.
You are
Sorry.
a co-host, so you should be able to share.
Hold on, let's see. Oh, forgive me. I'm going to try this differently because it's not agreeing. Give me one second. So anyway, the story is that recognizing that the holidays would be a little bit challenging, we had the good fortune at the JArts Collaborative of working with an organization based in New York called Asylum Arts. And they support Jewish artists making Jewish work around the world. And they said, we have these artists who really need some support and work right now. And so we were able to commission this project. And so the pieces I am about to show you were created by an artist named Shaarei, who is Israeli. And unfortunately, he couldn't be with us right now because it's the middle of the night by him. But, oh, hold on. Forgive me. Okay, I apologize, everyone. It is not letting me share. So,
Laura, if it's a file you can easily send, one of us can try to share it on your behalf.
That's great. I'm going to do that right now. Hold on one second.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. As you know, as we said earlier on, Zoom does function with a mind of its own.
You never know, right? Okay, hold on. All right, Elise, I just sent it to you. And as long as she's pulling it up, I will go in reverse order and I will tell you that as soon as you see this image that we're about to share, like I said, Shai is an Israeli artist, primarily photography and video. And I was so taken by this piece he did. So he created artworks around each of the 7 species. And it's interesting because for him as an Israeli, he has a very different connection to the 7 species than we as American Jews for the most part might. I think within the US, we tend to think of the 7 species as kind of a religious thing or like a symbol that goes with the holidays. Whereas in Israel, he just actually wasn't even aware of them. So he was doing his own learning to understand these symbols. And so he wrote, to go with each of these images, a piece that was both co-written with a rabbi and a piece that was particularly significant to him as an Israeli. So for this piece that he created for fig, which is my symbol, he created a piece out of fig leaves, which interestingly kind of resemble the piece that's right behind my head here. But he wrote, he said, "The fig is the original first fruit, the first mentioned by name in the Torah. It is with fig leaves that Adam and Eve clothed themselves after eating from the tree of knowledge and realizing their nakedness. Figs take an age to ripen and then refuse to do so all at once, so you need to harvest them daily. Torah is compared to a fig for this reason. Just as a person always finds new ripe figs on the tree, so too will they always find a new taste in the Torah they are studying. The lengthy ripening means figs will also differ from one another in sweetness," which we all know, I'm sure, if you've ever eaten a fig. And then he says, "In Meir Shalev's a pigeon and a boy." Oh, there we go. We have an image. Wonderful. All right, great. So if we can make that full screen, you can see. Perfect. Awesome. So as you can see, he's used fig leaves, which have this really interesting shape to them, and reconfigured them to create this image. And so my hope is, since we are shorter on time, what I would love to do is if everybody can take a look at this for a minute and put something in the chat that you see. Like, and I'm not going to say much more, but what do you see when you look at this image? Great. Yep. A square, a letter shin, really interesting. Hands, yep. Life, an envelope, rotation, I love that. Yep. A window, interesting. Hands and arms, yep. Okay, so while you keep thinking about that, I'm going to throw another one at you. What do you wish you knew? If Shai were here right now, what would you want to ask him? I love that. White, clean space supported by nature. What goes in the middle? Great question. Great question. What does this mean to you? Yep, absolutely. What's the significance of a square? Yep. Yep. Okay, so we've talked a lot about, we see the rotation. We're wondering what that means. A lot of ideas of the positive and negative space. Ruth, I love that you said, where are you waiting for the viewer to interpret? Yep. All right, why not the leaf? Why just the leaves, not the fruit? All great questions. So you are welcome to keep adding comments. I wish we had even a little bit longer to talk about the art itself. But since it's the middle of the night in Israel and Shai isn't able to join us, I went ahead and asked him a couple questions in advance that I thought might come up, because I, like you, was wondering many of these things. And so here's a little bit of a story that I think will help explain this. So just to note, when the pandemic started, Shai and his wife were actually in New York and fled to Israel, where they had a baby a few weeks later. So he was doing this work all while having a 3-week-old infant at home. So just to give you a sense of maybe how he was thinking about this new life and everything being a little bit crazy. And he says, while we were there, we enjoyed the weather, the green fields, and the blossoming nature. And during these walks, I started to feel inspired. New ideas were running through my mind, and very quickly I created new works. But without a studio or art supplies, I found new and inspiring materials all around me. I collected flowers and weeds from the fields nearby. I cut stems, connected leaves, and assembled the various parts into new kinds of plants. I borrowed my father-in-law's old camera and documented each of my weird and new constructions, which became a new photograph series on Israeli flora, titled Second Nature. So this is the first part of this. And then the second part is the 7 species photographs are a continuation of this. And the first series is based mostly on plants and flowers. So here, as an Israeli, it was his opportunity to explore what those 7 species mean to him in a way that I guess he really hadn't been taught growing up. He says, for the photographs, I collected parts of the 7 species plants from fields near Jerusalem, where you can often find dates, figs, and wheat growing several yards from each other, which isn't so surprising. For each of the species, I tried to best form what would express the nature of the plant. So in other words, he's trying to talk to us a little bit about what this plant does or what purpose it serves in nature. I photographed the plant parts and started experimenting with various installations. For some of the works, I created intricate constructions, and some were manipulated with Photoshop on the computer. For each work, I tried different shapes and plants before reaching the right image. I discovered that each plant has its own character, and I created several images for each species and eventually chose the one that seemed to best express the nature of the plant. And again, when he's talking about the nature of the plant, he's talking about his own learning and understanding what these species mean. He's talking about nature, you know, both in Israel, but generally as an artist, thinking about what nature brings to us. You all noted the shapes and the orientation, and he's thinking a lot about that if you look at his other works. He does a lot of kind of like trompe-l'oeil, like, you know, fooling the eye kind of artwork. So I highly recommend looking him up online. And if you would like to send this or one of the other 7 species that he created for the holidays, you can go to the Asylum Arts website, asylum-arts.org. And when that pops up, there'll be a project called Inspired 5781. And this is one of those projects, and they are completely free and open for everybody to use. So you can send as many e-cards as you would like. So I think Shai and his work are really special, and I'm so glad that in honor of the siman, the symbol of fig, that I could share this with you a little bit tonight. I hope I've given you some artistic inspiration. And of course, I would not be complete if I did not say, שתהא שנה זו טובה ומתוקה עלינו בלבלה נוסח אחר, שתתחדש עלינו שנה טובה ומתוקה מראשית השנה ועד אחרית השנה. So in other words, may it be a good year from start to finish. Thank you all so much, and I hope you'll send some e-cards. Shana tova.
Hi everyone, I am Rabbi Eliana Jacobowitz. I am the senior rabbi at Temple Bnei Brit in Somerville, and I'm also representing here today the IAC, the Israeli American Council, which explains the accent. And I am presenting to you the pomegranate, which, as many people noted, when you grow up in Israel, this is just part of the year cycle. You really don't have to go anywhere to get a pomegranate. For example, we have 2 trees in my parents' garden, but here it required looking at many, many stores to find this pomegranate. But success. When I was a kid, a secular kid in Israel, they taught us that the blessing over the pomegranate is a blessing that says, "Sheniyeh meleim mitzvot kerimon." Let us be filled or full of mitzvot, of good deeds, like the pomegranate is full of seeds. And, you know, in Israel, education in Israel in the 70s was actually really good. And the concept of Jewish religion in Israel, in secular Israel in the 70s, was a kind of amalgamation of different traditions of Sephardi and Ashkenazi and some Mizrahi, Yemenite traditions. And it was all kind of like put together, and it was leaning towards the Sephardi tradition for some reason. Most of the things that I learned later on in life were not Ashkenazi traditions, but Sephardi traditions. And then I grew up believing that we asked to be filled with mitzvot, which was very nice. And when I was in the army, this rabbi came to talk to us, and he was this Orthodox Hasidic Chabad Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he told us that the blessing is Shirbu zchuyotenu kerimon, let our merits be as plenty as the seeds of the pomegranate. So of course I thought this is the true blessing, and that what they taught me in secular school in Israel is just wrong. But what turns out later on in life, it's amazing, is that both blessings are genuinely authentic blessings over the pomegranate, over the limon. Just one of them, the one I learned when I was in the army, is the Ashkenazi and also the Yemenite blessing. And the one that they taught in school in Israel is the Sephardi blessing, the blessing that is used by many Jews in the Balkans and North Africa. And so, to me, this actually represented the fact, it brought to my mind a different way of thinking about the pomegranate, that really our tradition is filled with so many different traditions. Our tradition is made out of as many traditions as there are Jewish communities around the world. The Jewish people are filled with different traditions, like the pomegranate is filled with seeds. And none of these seeds is identical. We're all a little bit special. But we have this potential to come together, to bring together these traditions. And as a rabbi, as an Israeli who is now a rabbi in North America, I think about this a lot. There is great preference in North American Judaism towards the Ashkenazi tradition. But when you look at the history of immigration to the United States, you see that American Judaism have been started by also many Sephardi Jews. And we have had this potential, and I believe we still have the potential, to turn this Judaism in this country into a Judaism that belongs to Klal Israel, to all of Israel, a Judaism that crosses the boundaries of just one community, that brings us together, because we are no longer separated. We can talk to each other. We connect with each other. We can bring together East and West. We can bring together Ashkenazi and Sephardi and Mizrahi traditions. We can bring together some traditions that are from the Orthodox community and traditions that come from Reconstructionist Judaism, Reform Judaism. There is a lot of nice New Agey Judaism going on right now. And there are all of these different kinds of Judaism that we can learn from, all of these plenty that is represented, I think, in the limon, in the pomegranate. And what this will do, if we bring together all of these traditions, we will be able to choose the blessing that most, for the Seder, the blessing that most represents what we need for ourselves at this point in time for this year that is about to begin. The Ashkenazi blessing, that our merits will be as plenty as the pomegranate, speaks directly to the fact that we are on the verge of Yom Kippur, the day in which we are evaluated based on our actions, and is asking that when we are standing before God in judgment, that we will be recognized for the merits, that there will be reward for our good actions of the past year. In contrast, the Sephardi blessing, let us be filled with mitzvot like a pomegranate, comes from a verse that we have in the Talmud that says that even the least worthy members of the community of Israel are still filled with mitzvot like a pomegranate. So it comes from this idea that even if we messed up, we are still people who have the potential to do good in the world. And what I like about this blessing is that it is a blessing that puts the agency with us. When we say a blessing that is let someone else see what we're doing and reward us, we're putting the agency with someone else. When we are setting a kavanah, an intention that says, let us be filled with good deeds or filled with mitzvot, we are setting a kavanah or an intention for ourselves in the coming year. And then what we are doing when we're saying the blessing is we're asking God to be present for us and to affirm for us our own decision of having a year that is filled with responsibility for the world around us, with doing good in the world around us. And I feel that that is very empowering and that we can all use a little bit of empowerment right at this point in time, which is exactly why I decided not to try to open this rimon, which will be very disempowering for me if you ever try to open a rimon, and to kind of like prepare in advance one that is already ready for the blessing. So we can say both blessings over this rimon. So the first one, יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, שירבו זכויותינו כרימון. May it be your will, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, that our merits will be as plenty as this pomegranate.
Amen.
And because one is never enough, it's very good to have a second blessing. יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, שנהיה מלאים מצוות כרימון. May it be your will, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, that we will be filled with mitzvot, with good deeds like this pomegranate. Shana Tova.
Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Eliana. Shalom Aleichem, Erev Tov. My name is Michael Ragozin. Peace upon you and good evening. I'm the Rabbi at Shirat Hayam in Swampscott, Massachusetts. I want to thank Rabbi Winnick and CJP for putting together this Rosh Hashanah Seder. I want to thank all of you for tuning in this night. It's busy enough to prepare for the holidays, let alone have a Rosh Hashanah dinner and Seder already on Monday night. And lastly, I want to thank all my colleagues for the beautiful Torah that they have shared with us tonight. What I'd like to share with you is that at my table, I would love to have Rosh Hashanah dinner with all of my colleagues who have shared such beautiful Torah and have really opened up worlds of meaning and depth to the celebration around the table and the home celebration of the meal. At my table, a Seder this long before food would never fly. And so I'm going to show you a few simple, fun puns in English. The idea being with these symbolic foods that some of the foods are chosen for their symbolism, like the honey, and some of the foods are chosen for their word, and they make a pun on them, like the dates. And so I encourage you to give people a sense of what this tradition is, and then invite your guests to come with their own pun. So for instance, you might grab this simple thing, a stalk of celery. You might then have some raisins handy, and you can plop the raisins into the celery. 6 of them will do for this piece. And then you can say, in English, may it be your will that we all merit a raise in salary. Okay? That's the first. The other night I was telling my daughter, who's 13, that I would be sharing this, and she said, Abba, that is the dumbest, silliest thing I've ever heard. And then the next morning, she had written out on a card 3 more ideas that I want to share with you. Some of these she made up, some of them she went to a book of puns and then adopted them in her own language for the Rosh Hashanah. So now I have a bowl full of blueberries. And the blessing is just roll with it. And you then roll the blueberries across the table. You can imagine the silliness and the fun and potential stains that may occur. You can choose anything, but something that rolls, just roll with it. Her next suggestion was to have everybody's favorite appetizer, delicious mixed nuts. And she said, grab a handful of nuts and you say, this year, let us all be nutty with happiness. And then we eat the nuts. And then for her last, if what was shared earlier about the carrot was a difficult pun, if you don't know the Yiddish, if you don't know the Hebrew, her English pun for the carrot is, let us not care at all about the haters. So care, C-A-R-E-A-T, carrot, let us not care at all about the haters, and take a bite. So I am looking forward to challenging my daughter to coming up with one more surprise pun that she will be able to share at our table. If you have some youngsters that you want to engage, if they're witty, if they're word oriented, if they're language people, that a child could come up with something very, very humorous and add just a real smile to the Rosh Hashanah Seder. I turn it over to my colleague for the final presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rabbi Benjamin Samuels. I'm the rabbi of Congregation Shaarei Tefila, and I'm deeply thankful to be here with you. At the very end, or almost the end, actually, the end will be led by my dear teacher and colleague and friend, Rabbi Elise Winnick, who I'm very grateful to for including me in this program tonight. But although I'm coming at the Zanav, at the tail, really I'm going to be speaking about the Rosh, about the head. And as Rabbi Ragozin just said, and others have said, we have two types of symbols. We have ideational symbols, where the idea is what we hope to use to symbolize our hopes and wishes and blessings for the new year. And then we have linguistic symbols that we try to pun, to also invoke our hopes and deepest wishes for the new year. And so one of those ideational symbols that sometimes can also be a pun is that we should be sheniyeh lerosh v'lo lezanav, that we should be at the head and not at the tail. Now, traditionally, we may use the head of a sheep, although I have to tell you, I've never seen anyone use the head of a sheep at their Rosh Hashanah table. Some people will use the head of a fish. We prefer to use the head of a cabbage. And so any head will work. And the idea is that we want to have a good start, a new start. We want it to be led by reason and rationale, perhaps also with heart. That's a different symbol, but not at the tail and not passing catch up. But I have another layer of understanding that I want to add to Sheniyeh L'Rosh V'Lo L'Zanav. This past week was my youngest son's bar mitzvah, and he gave a beautiful drasha via Zoom for our congregation and for some friends and relatives. And he spoke about hakarat hatov. He spoke about recognizing the good, which is the rabbinic expression for expressing gratitude, that you have to recognize the good. And he asked the question, is God thankful? Is God thankful? We know that we're commanded to be thankful. There's several mitzvot in the Torah where we have to express our thankfulness, but is God thankful? And the reason why this question is important is, first of all, if God is thankful, then it may inspire our own thankfulness, but also we want to know what makes God thankful and how do we earn God's gratitude. So we have to go back, said my son Yakir, we have to go back La Rosh, to the very beginning. The first book of the Torah is Bereshit. The Shoresh, the Hebrew root of Bereshit, is Resh Aleph Shin, Rosh. And what do we see? That after each day of creation, what does God say? Vayer Elokim ki tov, God saw that it was good. And after the sixth day of creation, God looked at everything, and perhaps even at humanity that God just had created, right? Vayar Elokim, and V'hinei tov ma'od, behold, it was very good. God God's self recognizes the good. The challenge that we face as we transition from 5780 to 5781, from hashtag 2020 to whatever awaits us in our future, the challenge that we face is to recognize the good, the blessing, the hopeful, the positive, the optimistic in our own lives, in our relationships, in our community, in our big CJP family, our Boston Jewish community, in the United States, in Israel, in our world. There's too much focusing on the zanab, on the negative, on the tail. We have to uplift ourselves and focus ourselves so that we could recognize the Rosh, the Bereshit, the Tov, the good that's in our lives, and appreciate all of the blessings. And we strip away all of the accoutrements and all of the embellishments, and we get to the real essentials of what we wish for ourselves and for those that we love, what we hope for in the year to come, and what we pray for our country, for our people, and for our world. And so all of these simanim, the very creative simanim we heard, the simanim, the signs and symbols, whether ideational or linguistic, that yet to be created, may it be a year of robust imagination, of abundant kindness, and may we recognize, right, going all the way back to the beginning, the essential goods that in our life, and feel that gratitude so deeply. And if we end our year in such a beautiful symbolic way by joining together, and we begin our year with hearts and minds full of such gratitude, how could a good year not follow? We will make the blessing come to be. Thank you, Shana Tova. May it be a sweet, happy, healthy, purposeful year for us and for all of Israel.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Samuels. Hi, I'm Rabbi Elise Winnick. I'm CJP's Senior Director of Learning and Education. And I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight for our first ever community Rosh Hashanah Seder. It was really wonderful to be together, and I want to give particular thanks to our teachers who did an extraordinary job of giving us new insights. Perhaps we should recoin the phrase as, may you be what you eat. And our deep gratitude to our teachers for giving us both the linguistic and the purposeful ways of looking at the things that we eat as a sign for the year ahead. This may be the first time you've heard of a Rosh Hashanah Seder, let alone participated in a Rosh Hashanah Seder. The Seder is not actually the only somewhat unusual aspect of how Rosh Hashanah is observed. There's also an interesting fact around the recitation of the blessing of Shehecheyanu. You're probably familiar, Shehecheyanu, V'kiyamanu, V'higiyanu lazman hazeh. We offer gratitude that we have been kept alive and sustained and brought to this time. It's a blessing we say on new moments in time, and it's a blessing that we say on new things. And there's a debate in the tradition over whether the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are one long day, Yom HaArichta, or if they are two separate days. This raises a question in turn of, do we say Shehecheyanu once, or do we say it twice? And while it may be that for some of us spending 2 full days in shul, which we won't have the chance to do this year in the same way, does feel like one long day, be that as it may, the rabbis have a very elegant solution to this question of, is it Shehecheyanu on one day or is it on both days? And the answer becomes, we'll say it on both days, but on the second day, we make an effort to have a fruit, a new fruit we haven't eaten yet, or a new garment that we haven't worn yet. And this enables the Shehecheyanu to come to rest on something fitting, whether it is a 2-day Shehecheyanu or it is one long day. Now, why do we start from this place of being grateful to be here? What does it do for us? It gives us a very strong foundation from which to launch into the new year. And the things that we wish for become more plausible, more tangible. They can be concretized because we start from this place of strength with gratitude for the chance just to be present. Now, we invited all of you to give us your hopes and aspirations for the year. Carissa's going to put up now a slide of a word cloud of all of the articulations that you shared with us. It is intended to be shaped like an apple. Sometimes, oh no, I switched it from an apple to an oval. Never mind. We have hang on, we have this word cloud, here we go. You can tell from the size of the words how many people brought them to bear. We know that we are looking for health and peace. We know that we are seeking kindness and joy and hope. Well, CJP wishes all of these things and much, much more to you in the year ahead. We hope that it is a year of sweetness and great health. We hope that we will soon have the opportunity to celebrate together, face to face, three-dimensional, not using the Hollywood Squares type of a screen that gives us a taste of what it's like to be together, but a tease in many ways because we are still in many ways so far apart. We wish all of these things to you. And if you'd like to share wishes for the new year with one another, I invite you to do so in the chat window. In a moment, we'll unmute you if you want to share wishes for the new year for a few moments, voice to voice as well. And again, my wishes for you for a sweet, healthy, strong, creative, meaningful, and transformative year ahead. Shana Tova u'Mituka.